Hi guys, hope you're all having a good week. So we have done the next podcast, which fits in line with International Day for Persons with a Disability on the 3rd of December. So I thought it would be fantastic to have a chat with Mark Fosbrook and Alex Giles, who are both from Activity Alliance. So check out the following recording and let me know what you think. Thanks for joining us, Mark. Obviously, I know that you came on around Disability Pride Month, didn't you, to do a podcast with us back in July.
Yep.
But just for anyone who hasn't seen you on that last podcast, please can you tell me a bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, so my name's Mark Fosbrook. I'm a double baloney amputee with congenital deformities to my hand, so 2 fingers on each hand, born with it. And yeah, I now am on secondment at the West Midlands Combined Authority and work for Activity Alliance as a strategic partnership advisor and really looking at how we make the West Midlands a better place for disabled people.
And just before we get into this month's topic with the podcast, because I think it will fit really nicely into it, can you just tell me a little bit about Include Me, please?
Yeah, so Include Me was set up based on lots of conversations with disabled people, disability organisations, professionals, academics, and it was looking at how we can make the West Midlands an exemplary region for disabled people and those with long-term health conditions to be physically active. And what we wanted to do was to look at how we make organisations better at engaging with disabled people, how we create a strong citizens' voice that had disabled people sat at the heart of the conversation so it can influence policy decision making. We had looking at how we can remove the barriers to accessing public transport, to active travel, through to giving confidence to health and social care system to refer disabled people to activity. So yeah, quite a range of different elements, but yeah, was looking at trying to reduce the number of inactive people that are in the West Midlands, because we know the West Midlands is the most inactive region in the country, whether you have a disability or not. And we obviously wanted to change that.
And it's quite scary, really, isn't it, in terms of the lack of opportunities for people with a disability or long-term health condition, especially when it comes to physical activity, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there are opportunities out there, but people often don't know where they are or can't travel, or it's a lot of those sort of wider factors. They're worried about how they're going to put food on their plate, where they're going to live, how they're going to survive. And actually physical activity then just drops down that priority list. So it's not always an easy option or an easy choice, because there are things like life that get in the way. So it's how we can look at those to make it easier for everyone.
Definitely. Now, Alex is just joining us now. So if we just quickly wait, and then as he's coming in, hi, Alex, you okay?
Hello, sorry, I'm late. I was just on another call.
No worries, that's fine. So we're just talking and introducing ourselves. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Alex?
Yeah, so I'm Alex Giles. So I am currently a programs administrator within the programs team at Activity Alliance.
And also as well, just to give people watching this podcast a bit of a background about you, can you just give us a little bit more information about your disability, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so my disability is cerebral palsy quadriplegia, which means that it affects all four of my limbs.
Right, perfect. Thank you for letting us know about that. So, I don't know whether you guys are aware, but 3rd of December is International Day for Persons with a Disability. So I thought it would be good actually to reflect on, sort of the things that have improved about accessibility and inclusion, and also where we need to go in order to improve it furthermore. So the first question that I have for you guys is, what was life like for you as a child with a disability? So who would like to go first?
Go on, Alex.
Okay, yeah. For me then, sort of growing up, I had a very supportive parents. I think which was really helpful in terms of sort of my schooling. I went to a SEND school, so a SEND school, and I think for me that was a really important and positive step, because actually what that school was really good at focusing on is what I could do rather than what I couldn't do. Obviously, we all know they've got challenges and some tasks that are harder than others, but actually they were really focused on getting you into a positive mindset about what you could achieve. So I think that really helped me sort of shape my experience for a little bit later on in life. So I definitely think having that positive school experience for me made a huge difference. I know that's not the case for everybody, but for me, absolutely, that positive school experience was a great start in life for me, I think.
And what about yourself, Mark? What was life for you like as a child with a disability?
Yeah, so I'm only just a couple of years older than Alex, so fairly similar in experience. But I was fortunate enough, I suppose, when I was growing up to go through mainstream education, so a little bit different to Alex. And I suppose I remember at first school, the head teacher, when I was transitioning into middle school, really didn't want me to stay in mainstream education. She was really adamant that I needed to be in a SEND school, and was really quite nasty and spoke to my new head of the middle school, which was next door, saying that he shouldn't be allowed over. Fortunately, the head at the middle school was very aware of wanting to be more inclusive and accessible, and said, no, it's all right, we'll have him, and absolutely flourished and enjoyed my time there and felt really supported. I think, growing up sort of in and out of school, definitely had its challenges. I was, as I said, just a couple of years older than Alex, and I think, there were not necessarily as many people with that same positive mindset. My parents were absolutely supportive and, would take me everywhere. I think they loved me because every half term, every holiday, I just went off and did holiday sports clubs. And they were just normal, regular sports clubs. And I just rocked up and didn't even really consider my disability as a barrier or a blockage, but more of using then sport to show that it didn't need to define me. So would just get stuck in and play, and was lucky enough to play for my school team in hockey, and I'm from Portsmouth originally, so played for Portsmouth. And I would play, without pads on in goal. People would smack the ball at me, thinking that the keeper didn't have any pads on, and I would stop it with my metal leg, kick it away, and you could just see their faces drop to the ground. And it was then as the ball started to come harder and faster at me that I then had to eventually put pads on, because the limb centre were telling me off for denting my legs every week. So I suppose in that respect, it was, I had relatively positive experiences, although definitely had occasions where children were horrible and nasty to me, calling me names, saying that I couldn't do various things, etc. So, yeah, quite a mixed bag, really.
And I think it's quite interesting, actually, with the contrast with both of you guys in terms of you going to mainstream, Mark, and you going to an SEND school. Alex, like yourself, Mark, I went to a mainstream school, and especially in primary, I distinctly remember up until year 5 or year 6 being the only child within school that had a disability. And I found that quite isolating to a degree, because there was no one like me. There was no one that I could really identify with. I think back then when I was in school, health and safety isn't what it is now. It wasn't like that. So the teachers wouldn't actually let me take part in PE. So I had to sit on the side, which was always really annoying. And then I'll never forget, there was this one girl that came in just as I was leaving primary school that had exactly the same disability as me. And again, I think actually looking at the contrast of both parenting skills from my parents and that girl's parents was completely different, because I've got two siblings who are able-bodied. So my parents always have had the mentality that tough, if I'm finding something difficult, you've just got to get on with it and do it like your brother and sister, find your own way. You've got to deal with it. Whereas that other girl from that school was quite mollycoddled by her parents. And you could see the difference, because we ended up going to secondary school together and everything, and things like tying your hair up. I found my own way around doing it. She never did, and everything. So you could see that contrast really within the parenting skills of how much your parents sort of helped you out, really.
And I think parents really do, help or hinder. And I think, that her parents were probably very much feeling that they were helping and being supportive and really loving and caring for their daughter. But actually the knock-on impact of that is that, children just need to learn and need to be able to make those mistakes and try and work out how to do that. And I suppose maybe because my dad has a similar disability to me, that he just let me get on with it. And I know now with one of my boys, it's very similar in that I tried to go, look, this is how daddy did it, but he doesn't want to know and tries to do it himself, and then works out that it's how daddy said was the best way to do it. But yeah, he's got to learn for himself, hasn't he? So.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose whilst we're on the topic, have you guys got any siblings or anything as well? Because obviously I know that can sometimes change how your upbringing is obviously given and stuff. And I think it is quite positive when you do have siblings sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting, because I am an only child, and I think you're right. I definitely think sometimes for me, maybe having that brother or sister might have made a difference, because actually they also then see how you have to approach, as Mark was saying, sort of tasks and challenges in different ways. Obviously, there was never anybody to sort of bounce those ideas off or get that informal feedback from us. So I definitely think that might have made a difference actually to me as well. Is that if I'd have had that brother or sister, I think that would have definitely had an impact. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting and good question, because I think it does make a difference.
Yeah, no, I'm an only child as well. I think my parents got it right the first time, so they thought they didn't need to try again.
I kept saying that about with my parents. They decided to give me two younger brothers and sisters and stuff, and I sometimes I've waited 20 years to be the only child again for them to move out and everything, so I'm loving life with them being away and seeing them that little bit less and everything. But beggars can't be choosers, they're all right, I suppose. Yeah. So my next question for you guys is, what was your first memory of things not being accessible for you?
Well, I suppose for me, again, just being a couple of years older than both of you, I remember, I suppose, going out to the shops with my mum in my chair, and this old lady came up and started talking about me to my mum and not talking to me. And I even remember her just leaning over and giving me this slobbery kiss on my forehead as like, bless. And it really just made me think, what is going on? Why are you not talking to me? Why were you talking just to my mum? And I suppose there were probably instances before that, because I remember thinking, well, that's just that sort of typical kind of focus on don't focus on the person in the wheelchair and focus on the other person, because obviously if I'm in a chair, I'm not going to be able to speak. So I was already aware of that. So there must have been other occasions, but yeah, that was definitely a lasting memory that sort of scarred me for life.
Yeah.
Especially with slobbery kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just following on from that, I'm going to be quite boring in the sense that that's absolutely the same experience that I had. I remember sort of, growing up as that child, that they'd always speak to my mum and dad. I remember on the first couple of occasions, I'd sit there thinking, do I speak, or do I kind of go along with what's happening and not speak? So absolutely, that was and I always remember the one phrase that a gentleman used out we were just walking along to the village, or just out in the community, and it actually said to my mum, "Oh, when's he getting better?" And I remember sitting there thinking, really? Like, no, I didn't know there was anything wrong with myself, to be honest. So, yeah, Mark's absolutely right. It's those first experiences you have where the people often address your parent or guardian, whoever's with you, rather than yourself as the individual. I think that's always the first sort of experience that sticks with you forever, really.
But to be fair, Alex, your mum is nice to talk to.
She is much nicer to talk to than me, so I can see why they did it. Yeah, that's right.
No, I agree with you both there, because like yourselves again, and I'm not a wheelchair user or anything, but people did generally speak to my mum instead of me. And then the other thing that I think has been, an ongoing theme, which I suppose putting it into a more positive thought process and putting a positive spin on it, is that turn of phrase that people use, saying, "You can't do that," without me even having to go first. They automatically make that assumption, you can't do that. And I suppose that's always one thing that's grated on me throughout my life, because people think that they know better and everything. And it's probably actually the worst possible thing someone can say to me, "You can't do that," because I feel then that I have got to prove a point, just to show them, actually, you're wrong, I'm right, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Like, I've proved it to you. I remember, and my nan is in one of those eras that she's very old-fashioned, so she still uses the term handicapped, which I can't stand, but unfortunately, older people within older generations, you just can't change their thought process. And I'll never forget an instance where she was knitting. And I said to her, I was like, "Oh, no, I want to go and stuff." And she says, "No, you can't do it, because you've only got one good hand. You're never going to be able to do that properly, because you need two hands to do it." So I went home and was like, "Right, I'll show you." So I remember watching for a solid week YouTube videos on how to do it. And I learned how to do it. I showed her, went over to her house to show her. And I've never picked up any knitting needles since, because I don't have any, interest in it at all, but it was just out of principle, I felt.
And I think as a disabled person, you can go down one of two routes with that. You get people telling you can't do it, and you believe it, and you end up not doing anything. Or like yourself, I was very much that same. People tell me I can't do something, and well, I am going to do it. So I remember, I suppose nans are great, aren't they? Because they always do stuff and think, that you maybe can't do something. And I remember my nan used to play lawn bowls. I said, "I'll give you a game, Nan." And played her and beat her, told her to go away and practice, which she took loads of offence to. But then she won loads more competitions and trophies at her bowling club. I played her again. I beat her again. So I was always able just to rub it into my nan's face. And she loved that. She was telling me that I should take up bowls and join the local bowls club, etc. And, as sort of a, young lad at a time looking at a bowls club full of slightly older individuals, that didn't really appeal to me that much. But it was, always nice to be able to show people what you can do rather than what you can't.
But I think that's it. Just building on that point for me, with especially for us as disabled people, I've always thought that kind of one of the skills that probably has to burn through a little bit brighter is that resilience. I think everybody shows, we've all got sort of resilience levels, of course, but I think disabled people have always, for me personally, I've always thought that resilience is the thing that we have to show, perhaps that has to burn through even more, because you have to be resilient to, you might get told 5 or 10 times, and not on purpose by anybody, but just because language and sometimes ignorance just gets in the way through nobody's fault, but just the natural sort of happens. But I think resilience is something for disabled people that we have to show that even bit more of resilience, really, is to think, okay, I've been told I can't do it this way, I'll find another way and I'll go back when I can do it. So I think resilience is really key.
But I think as well with that, Alex, there's a lot of times that disabled people have that resilience. They have the empathy because they understand how others feel.
Yeah.
They have the things like timekeeping and adaptability.
Yeah.
And they just look at that from their own disability context of day-to-day life.
Sure.
Don't realise that actually they're really powerful traits to move into employment. So I know obviously the three of us are all very fortunate in to have jobs and to work.
Yeah.
And we've utilised that experience that we've had as disabled people and the challenges we faced and that resilience and the empathy and brought that into a work context, which has enabled us to really be, a fantastic employee and great at what we do because of our disability. And I think the more that we can help disabled people that haven't seen that connection, see that connection is just a good thing.
And I think a lot of it, because as I said before, when we were talking about being a child, having a disability, I was the only one in school with my disability. And I think the one thing that I look back on that I think, being given that opportunity was an absolute godsend for me was the horse riding and stuff. I remember as a child, I started riding at the age of 7 just as a form of therapy for my disability. And it quickly, because I remember watching Paralympics and seeing a girl with the same disability as me called Nicola Tustain compete, and she won gold in equestrian and stuff at the Paralympics. And I remember saying to my mum and dad, that's what I'm going to do. And one of the very first para competitions that I ever did, honestly, it really opens your eyes up to actually the diversity of disability and everything. So from going to school where I was the only person with my disability, and I couldn't really identify with anyone, and then going on to the competition circuit and everything and seeing people getting crane lifted onto the horse, blind people, people hard of hearing, people with really severe CP, cerebral palsy and everything getting on, just really opens your eyes up. And actually, I think that provides you with so much more motivation to go, actually, you know what, I've got nothing to complain about because I'm really fortunate, look. And actually, it's something to be really proud of, having a disability, I think, in a lot of ways as well.
Definitely. I mean, I didn't really know about disability sport until I was about 12, 13. So as I said, I just always played with my mates in the playground, representing my school, and loved sports. So just played it all the time. And it was only when I got something called Osgood-Schlatter's disease in my knee, which is a degeneration of the bone, which a lot of young boys get. And it's not normally that much of an issue, but because of wearing artificial legs, it pushed onto my knee, which meant that I had to, if it was bad, I had to spend days off of my legs. So my dad then found this sport called wheelchair basketball that I'd not seen before. And that's where I then first discovered disability sport. But what I realised was actually because I'd been playing and competing with non-disabled people, suddenly to move into this world of disability sport, I was pretty good because I'd already, been pushing myself against people with more function than I had, but I'd never really realised it. So, yeah, it definitely opens your eyes when you realise there is this whole world of opportunity out there.
Definitely. And, it's one thing I feel thankful for because of my disability, because I wouldn't have ever been able to see that side of things if it wasn't for my disability. And I think just as we go on to my next question that I have for you guys, so I feel like, as a woman, it's sometimes really difficult because without meaning to sound stereotypical here, women generally focus more on how they look and everything, doing the hair. And that's one of the barriers I kid you not that I've found most frustrating throughout my life doing my hair. My mum's a hairdresser, so she's always had that expectation that her daughter's hair has to look good. And I remember for years, learning how to tie my hair up or even do it nice, straighten it, curl it, whatever that might be. I used to throw brushes at the mirror and everything because of how annoying I found it. And that's probably one of the biggest barriers that I've ever had to endure. Now, what are some of the barriers that you guys have had to endure that you found most frustrating and it's taken you years to find your own way around doing it?
I struggled doing my hair. So then decided to shave it all off because that's a lot easier. So in that respect, I suppose I was quite fortunate from that. But I suppose for me, it was when you got, people wearing jeans and with button-up flies. Well, I could never do those. So always had to look for different jeans or, wearing tracky bottoms because it was easier or, I could do shoelaces up, but it just took me a bit of time and struggle with top buttons and things like that. So I suppose there was those sorts of things that were always a bit of a problem. But then also, I suppose, just as I started to grow up a bit more, when you wanted to be a bit more independent and cook stuff, is the added risk of carrying boiling water and or if I didn't have my legs on, I've been able to get up to the top shelf, etc. So I dread to think how many times I've put myself in probably unnecessary danger. But it's something that you could know you've got to do just if you want to be that independent kind of person. But yeah, look back now and some of the things that I've done are definitely, like you said earlier on about health and safety, definitely wouldn't have achieved any awards for health and safety with some of the stuff that I've attempted to do just to try and overcome challenges. But I suppose also being born with my disability, never known any different. So I've always looked at something and gone, right, you can't do that in that way. How can you do it? And I've always been solution focused and come up with various ways of doing things. So, I think I've managed to, played musical instruments growing up. Always wanted to play the saxophone. Not great when you've only got two fingers on each hand. So I did the trombone instead because you didn't need then to press buttons. Learned to play the keyboard. But again, could only get so much because I seem to always pick things that involve a lot of fingers. But then I would get my computer to be able to play music for me instead. And then, played volleyball. Again, another sport where I just picked something that's, involves using your fingers quite a lot. So I suppose it's always just gone, right, what's the biggest challenge I can have? Let's try and do that. So
And just quickly before we move on to you, Alex, just one other thing that I'd like to ask you, Mark. Obviously, you've just mentioned about, you can't even count the amount of times that you've probably put yourself in danger to be able to do something. And I think likewise, myself and Alex can really resonate with that. But one thing that sort of got me thinking, since my sister has not long had a baby, actually just at how inaccessible being a parent probably is going to be for us as people with disabilities. I know that myself and Alex aren't parents yet or anything, but how have you managed to adapt to parenthood, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And, as we were preparing for our first child, it was, how am I going to change nappies? How am I going to hold the baby and not drop the baby? And it was all those sorts of things that I was just like, what do I do? And we ended up going to, like, you go to all the sort of training and everything, and they normally do it in like a big group. But we found this private maternity. I think she used to be a midwife and then had set up her own business. And it was more of you went to a farmhouse and there was only a few couples going to be there. And then you would so we thought, that might be a better option. And got there, and actually the other couple that were due to be there with us had cancelled. So it ended up just being myself and my wife, which was absolutely brilliant because we could then just sit down with her and go, right, how am I going to do this? And we then worked through those solutions together. And I realised that, yes, I could do it this way better than that way, or I could do this, or I couldn't. Actually, things like poppers on reusable nappies would be a problem, but Velcro would work, and all those kinds of concerns and worries that I had. Then when obviously you end up having that little one there in front of you, you're so conscious about not dropping them anyway that I don't think it was actually ever really a worry, because you just manage and you just find different ways. So I had like a baby carrier that I put onto the front of me, so if I was sat in my wheelchair, they were sort of sat on my lap safely. And you just learn to manage and cope, because as any parent, you realise that all parents haven't really got a clue, and they're just winging it most of the time. So they just you work out a way of doing it.
Definitely. I mean, the other week my sister had gone out and left my nephew with me for a couple of hours, and I kid you not, so she got like a little travel cart at ours, put him in the travel cart, and he started crying, and I'm like, oh, how am I going to get him out? How am I going to get him out? Because I can't put both of my hands in to even scoop him out. And I kid you not, I'm so glad that there's no cameras in the house, because I had to pick him up from his baby grow and carry him over to the sofa. And literally, he's big enough now that, he's okay. And I feel a little bit more secure, if I drop him. He should be okay.
Bounce back. He'll bounce back.
he should bounce back and he'll be fine. But those are the things actually that you look at, don't you? And you go, oh my God, like if ever I did have any kids, those are all the things that I'm going to have to think about. And actually, up until my nephew, up until you have kids of your own, you are not putting anyone else apart from yourself into unnecessary risk to be able to achieve the things that you want to do. But
then when you're at the gym, do you drop weights all the time?
No.
Exactly the same. Yeah. You don't end up, you just think of it because you suddenly go, it's a knife, it's a child. Yeah. It suddenly adds pressure to you. But actually, if you manage to carry other things, then you'll be fine. It's just working out the way in which it works for you without hurting, because you won't hurt a weight if you drop it, so you're not as bothered.
Well, exactly. And what about yourself, Alex? Is there anything that you've particularly found difficult over the years that's been quite an annoying or frustrating barrier for you?
Well, I think to start with, to build on both the excellent points that you both make, I think the challenge to start with is society kind of, it gives you those pictures, doesn't it? So when you're growing up and you're sort of viewing the world, you're viewing the world through the lenses that we see in the media or on the TV or in the newspaper. Like we were saying there, you view, this is how all parents must behave and must be. So I think the problem to start with is you're instantly hit with those societal barriers of what normal life should look like. And you think, if I don't do it to this standard or to this level, then I'm failing and I'm not doing it properly. So I think that was always the first challenge. I think for me, after then really was because I grew up with, obviously I had friends at school, but a lot of my friends that lived round by me were all, non-disabled and went to mainstream school. So obviously, I suppose the first challenge was I couldn't sort of really play the kind of football with them on the pitch and stuff. So I used to sit there and think, I'd kind of really like to get involved in this and sort of couldn't get involved to the same level as them. So then that's when I started looking at things like, so I'd always knew from a fairly early age of going through school that maybe I could look at coaching sport maybe instead. So I can't play the sport to the same level as them, but what's to say that I can't become a coach in the future? Because I had to go at sort of, disability sport growing up. So I'd done bocce to a fairly decent level, but I realised I was nowhere near as good as, as those other people that have gone on to win sort of loads of accolades and medals. So I always thought about, well, how can I sort of pass on my sporting knowledge and experience in other ways? And I think that's been really useful for me to have to look at it through that other lens as well.
Curbs as well, Alex.
Yeah, drop curves. Yeah, drop curves are definitely not a friend of mine. It definitely normally is the drop curve that wins over me. Yeah, so I suppose my only advice on this would be to stay on the flat as much as you can. That's not my new. Yeah.
Thing is, though, as well, that's quite difficult where you're from, isn't it? Because Dudley's all like uphill.
It is very hilly in the western parts of the Black Country. It's very hilly. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've not picked the best area to live in, really.
I haven't. No, I haven't.
So I suppose the next question that I've got for you is, obviously you've said some about the barriers that you guys face. In what ways would you say that you're grateful for your disability in terms of the positive things that it's brought you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it really, for me, it builds on what we were talking earlier. So it's given me that resilience and that positive outlook. So I absolutely, like Mark said, I was born with my disability as well. So I've not known any difference, and I do think that was a huge plus for me, because every sort of task and challenge that I've come up with or come up against in life, I've been able to think, well, this is the cards that you've got, you're dealt, so this is what you need to do. So I think for me that was really that was a real plus, is that I've not known any other way. So pretty much from being born and day dot, I've had to get on with it. And I think something that helped me actually building on that is that obviously as a child growing up, you need to sort of, if you can't do some of those tasks for yourself, you have to then communicate with others about how they help you to complete those tasks or challenges. So I think something that really helped me, and proud of with my disabilities, that really helped my communication from an early age. So I had to learn, actually, how do I ask for help to do this? Because I can't do it. So if I can't do it and I can't ask for help, I'm not going to get that task done. So I think something that I'm really proud of with my disabilities, that I was able to build that communication really early on, which I think has really helped me go through life. But I think, just to finish off on that point, I think, you have to be proud of who you are, and really, our representation, I think within our workforces and our jobs, I think representation, really matters. I think that if you can see people that are like you or you can aspire to, then you can believe you can get there. So absolutely, it's my, burning desire now, following on working with Mark. My biggest thing is I want to see as many disabled people and those with long-term health conditions in the workforce as we can, because I believe that's what will inspire, the young girls and boys growing up and young children. If they can see me or Mark going to work, doing our jobs, making that difference, and hopefully in 10 years, 15 years' time, they'll believe that they can do that too. So for me, representation is huge.
Definitely, I completely agree. And Mark, asking you the same question, in what ways would you say that you're grateful for your disability?
I'm really grateful for my disability and really proud. And I think, people find that strange sometimes when you say you're proud and glad to be disabled. But for me, I've been fortunate enough to represent my country in 3 different sports, to go to a Paralympics, to go to World Championships, and to travel around the world as a result of it. And would I have achieved that if I didn't have my disability? Possibly, but probably not. But also, as we sort of said earlier on, the fact that the resilience and empathy and all of those sorts of skills that it's given me to then be fortunate enough to be fairly successful in work and to have progressed through a number of careers and opportunities. But equal to that is the realization that actually the biggest challenges in my life haven't been around my disability. And a lot of people think, well, if you're disabled, that has got to be the toughest thing to live with. And it really hasn't. The toughest thing for me was my mum dying of cancer when I was 16, and then having a stillborn daughter, which was full term when I found out on Christmas Day. Absolutely devastating. But they are far more impactful than my disability has ever been. So I suppose with that, it's, yes, the disability that I've got has, helped me to succeed, has helped me to achieve. Yes, there's been loads of challenges, barriers that people have put in the way, things that could have stopped me from doing lots of things. But it's also then I've looked at it from that positive lens, as Alex said, is looking through that lens and going, well, how important is it? And it's made me realise that actually the inequalities that I have faced are very similar to other protected characteristics and other individuals who have faced these inequalities that we all come across. And I suppose with work now, the understanding and awareness that, sort of, I'd say 80% of the issues and challenges that we face are common across every characteristic. And actually, the ones that are unique to us as disabled people and unique to someone from a diverse community would actually need to be addressed, as well as that larger space. So how can we work better together to reduce those root causes of inequality? And as Alex said earlier on, it's those societal views and behaviours that we need to change, but also the systems that are in place that are failing us as disabled people. And although, obviously, as well as International Day for Disabled People on the 3rd of December, we're actually now in Disability History Month. I look back and see the journey that we've come on, back when in 1995, the Disability Discrimination Act came into play. And before that, how, there were disabled people that were really getting out there and putting their lives in the firing line to pave the way for us as disabled people. And I'm so grateful for what they've done and achieved for us. Yet there's still so much more to be done, and it's quite disappointing sometimes to see how far we've come, yet still not quite be where we need to be.
Definitely. And I think that is the thing, and that actually you've probably just answered my next question, really.
Sorry.
Do you think we've improved in terms of accessibility and inclusion over the past, however many years? I personally think we have, even in the respect from, taking me back to when I was at school and I wasn't even allowed to take part in PE and everything. Look at how many people with disabilities and long-term health conditions are now taking part in PE and physical activity, because that's always been one thing that I've found frustrating. Like, I'm really grateful for my sport and everything, but had I have been allowed to take part in PE, would I have gone down a different route and chosen a completely different sport? I wasn't even given that option, really.
I think it's interesting with that, because like you said, I suppose being that couple of years earlier, there wasn't that same issue around health and safety. So I was allowed to join in with all of my classmates and just get stuck in. So didn't experience that having to sit on the sidelines or having to go to the library. Then we seem to get into this culture of health and safety, where obviously you then had those challenges. And now, like you're saying again, there's that raised awareness of understanding of actually people can go and join in, but we just need to understand what we need to maybe do differently.
Definitely. And I do think, as far as physical activity and sport goes, 2012, I personally think, has been an absolute catalyst for sort of making people with a disability think, actually, there's no reason why I can't try that. But equal to that, I think it has raised the awareness of able-bodied people thinking, actually, there's no reason why people with a disability can't take part in that either. Like, all we need to do is make a bit of an adjustment here, a bit of a tweak here, there, and everything. And actually, Bob's your uncle. You can take part quite effectively, can't you? So I think really, whilst we're definitely not where we need to be is in terms of accessibility and inclusion, we have come on leaps and bounds, like from 20, 30 years ago, really.
Yeah, I think
definitely go on, Alex.
Yeah, I think that you're thinking about us to a degree. I think the Olympics and Paralympics of 2012 did make a difference. I think the disappointing part from that for me is the legacy it did carry on for maybe a year or two. Then it felt to me that it kind of stagnated a little bit. I think but it did do some really good bits. I think where we've seen the real sort of gear change for me is with the recent Commonwealth Games and with the rugby league. Is that having those, non-disabled and disabled events on at the same time, that's what I think has made the real difference, because you haven't had to go to a venue and be specifically, I'm watching disabled sport or non-disabled. You're just there in the moment watching both of those sports at the same time. And I think for me, to make that real change going forward, the model of the Commonwealth Games and the recent Rugby League World Cups has to be kept going. It has to be that integration of both sports performing together at the same venue on the same days. That has to carry on for me to see that real transformational change.
And seeing that Rugby League World Cup final, and seeing all the matches on mainstream primetime TV, if you'd have said, that would have happened even 5 years ago, you'd have gone, no, we're not going to see it. I remember back years and years and years ago, there was the Big Eight, which was wheelchair basketball, sort of all the top 8 teams playing each other, and it used to be on Channel 4. And it was amazing to watch. I loved it. And then it just disappeared, and you never had sort of that disability sport being seen or viewed. And, you definitely have to sort of look around for it. But to see it in that mainstream primetime slot is amazing. But, while I think 2012 was a defining moment in people realizing that disabled people were athletes, rather than they're just having a bit of fun and it's nice for them to have a go. I think outside of the sporting context, there's an awful lot that still needs to be done. A lot of various sectors that have tried to make things compliant because that's their duty as part of the Equality Act, but actually then it doesn't necessarily mean that's a meaningful or positive experience for people.
And that sort of brings me on to my second to last question is, what do you think is needed to make society more accessible and equatable for people with a disability?
For me, I think... go on.
No, go on. Sorry, you go on.
For me, it comes down to 3 things. It comes down to systems, services, and society. So the services we need to make sure are inclusive, engaging, co-produced with disabled people so they're fit for purpose and keep people happy. The system is obviously things that are failing disabled people, and there are many systems that are failing disabled people still. You just look at, over COVID, the fact that every 6 out of 10 COVID deaths were a disabled person, or the fact that, nearly 50% of people in poverty are either disabled or live with a disabled person. And now with the cost of living, we're seeing all those challenges and that come to the forefront again. There is definitely something there that needs to be addressed and looked at from a system level and how we resolve things. And then society, yes, we have seen a lot of people become far better at engaging with disabled people and being supportive and empowering people to be able to go and do things. But there's still an awful lot of negativity out there. I mean, I posted back at during Disability Pride Month, statistics around the disability pay gap, where we know in the West Midlands, disabled people are paid the lowest amount anywhere in the country and have the third largest pay gap between disabled and non-disabled people. And the comments that we got back from those videos were, well, disabled people can't do as much. Disabled people can't work as hard. You know, how could, you know, if Alex was working in a supermarket, how could he put beans on the top shelf? Or, you know, it was some really negative comments, basically saying, well, the disabled people get benefits anyway, so they're supported. And it was really eye-opening to make me go, while there is a massive group of people now out there that are far better at engaging and are open to treating everyone in a more equal way, there's still that polarized approach and a lack of awareness and understanding that needs to be addressed.
And I think for me, just building on that from Mark, is that, you know, as what we're recording this podcast today around International, Disabled Day and I think all those initiatives and things are really, really important, and we shouldn't lose sight of any of those initiatives. But absolutely, what it needs to get to is we don't just think about, or society just doesn't think about disabled people on International Day for Disabled People. It needs to think about us every day, all day, in everything that we do. And while, as Mark was saying, Disability History Month, absolutely is paramount that we raise awareness at those times. But again, the awareness has to be every single day of the year. It's not just, we've done it for 2 or 3 weeks. We've played our part and then we've forgotten about it. So absolutely, that's the key. And just to build on the 3 S's that Mark said, absolutely spot on with all of those. Again, it goes back to that representation. So we have to see people like us doing those jobs and those roles, and that's what will make future generations believe that they can play that active part in society that they want to play.
And that's really where we want to do that now within the West Midlands, and start to build on, how we can create that greater level of representation, how we can influence those systems and get to a point where across the West Midlands in particular, if you live here or you come here, it feels different. You feel supported, you feel welcomed, you're treated with respect and dignity that you deserve as a human being, that you almost don't have to plan your journey, because actually it's going to be accessible. You're going to be able to access and get on things or do things or get around, or, you don't have to make all those thoughts and considerations just to get through a day that you currently have to do. And if we can, it may take us 10, 20 years to get to that point, but if we start work on it now, it will make it far better for those younger individuals that are starting on their journey. And if we can, I suppose, build on that work that those fantastic individuals did to get us to where we are now, and we can continue to bang that drum and make those significant changes, then hopefully for our future generations, they'll look back at this time and go, well, you know what? That Alex, Ashleigh and Mark and all these other disabled people, the likes of Shani Dander and others within the Power 100, they actually really made a difference and really made a change. And, we're grateful for that.
Definitely. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. And I'd like to wrap it up just on one last question, which is, if someone was watching this podcast today and was thinking, how can I make something, what I'm doing, how can I make someone's life with a disability more accessible and equatable for them with my own actions? What advice would you give to them?
You're talking in terms of a non-disabled person watching this. I would say go and talk to the person. At the end of the day, we're human beings. Hopefully you've realised that we can all talk and share our experiences. And even if we, as disabled people, had communication challenges, we can understand and find a way of communicating. So actually just think of us as another human being and treat us how you would want to be treated. And that will be so powerful for that person that you engage with to be respected, not to be looked at as a vulnerable person and someone that needs to be patted on the head or given that slobbery kiss like I was all those years ago. Because we've got such a great diversity of thought that there's a lot of benefits of being not only our friends, but our work colleagues and just good human beings. So, yeah, that would be my one area.
And what about you, Alex?
I have to say, I'm slightly disappointed you went to Mark first, because he's actually, for me, he's giving you the golden ticket, and he stole my answer really, because he's absolutely that. Talk to disabled people at every level. So if you want to make a real change to society and for disabled people, involve disabled people in the process, and you're already, for me, over halfway there, because we'll be able to work with you and give you that advice and guidance and support and ideas of how you can make that change. And actually, I think what's really important, it doesn't have to, we're not talking a lot of the time about spending huge amounts of money either. We know that money's tight, and to change a lot of systems can take a lot of money and a lot of time. Actually, as disabled people, we've got plenty of ideas sometimes that mean just by putting things together in a different way means you can make that change. So it would just be exactly the same as Mark. Talk to disabled people at every level that you want to make.
I would just add to that as well is don't be scared. Don't be afraid. Don't, if you put something in a positive way when you're talking to us, actually, that's fine. And we won't be offended if you say something wrong, as long as if we correct you, that you adjust. But also, as Alex then said, and as I mentioned earlier, why there is that area of poverty and not necessarily a lot of costs associated with having to make those changes, disabled people, there's also the flip side. There's a lot of disabled people that have money to spend. And, we know in the West Midlands, there's sort of the annual spend is like £48.9 billion that is in the West Midlands alone. So why would you not want to engage with us? Because even if it's not from a feel-good factor or the right thing or, just to be our friends, as an organisation, from an economic point of view, we've got money to spend and we won't come to you if you're not engaging with us and you're not inclusive.
Definitely. And like you guys, I think, echoing what you guys have just said there, and also from the point of view of making that individual feel approachable to us as well. Like if we do need any help or anything, we feel that we can ask for help without feeling judged or embarrassed about it. I think that goes a long, long way. And like you've just said, Mark, not being afraid to say the wrong things. Actually, I think the community of people with disabilities, we've actually got a really good sense of humour. So I don't think half of the time we'd actually find it necessarily offensive if you say the wrong thing. We'd more likely have a bit of a laugh and a joke about it. And also, I think the one thing that has been quite a negative in the grand scheme of things with all of this political correctness, I get why it's there and I get the importance of it. But I think the one detriment to it is actually the fact that people are scared to ask that all-important question of, look, I know that you've got a disability, but what can I do to make things easier for you? People are too afraid to ask that all-important question, and it is all down to political correctness in a lot of ways, because they don't want to come across like they're saying anything in the wrong term or wrong turn of phrase or whatever. And it's not something that should be shied away from. You should be able to ask that question without feeling, apprehensive about the repercussions, because there won't really be any if you say anything wrong.
If you're asking it in a way of wanting to learn and educate, I'm always, parent, you see kids going, oh, look, look, he's got no legs. And they're like, oh, yeah, go and have a chat. And I really don't mind. I love that. I'd love to educate you and go, I ran a disability awareness session at my little boy's Beavers group last week. And it was just, informing people so that they know, and I'd much rather that. The only one time I ever felt not comfortable talking about my disability was when I was in a changing room and the boy went, oh, look, Daddy, he's got no legs. And Daddy went, oh, go and ask him about it. And I was obviously in a changing room, naked, getting dry from the shower. And I was like, I really don't feel comfortable talking to your little boy while I'm naked. Yeah. Nothing to do with my disability, it just didn't sit right with me. But, that's it. And it's the same if you're working with a colleague, from an ethnically diverse community that you go, well, actually, I'm not sure about Diwali. I'm not sure about, what a Gurdwara is. Actually, let's have a chat. Tell me how what's the, what do you do? What's it about? Because I want to know. And people then are open to that because it just means we're learning about one another as human beings and learning what we can do, what we can't do, what our interests are, what, the situation is, so it's just that being open and honest and respecting everybody and everybody's views and everybody's differences, because that's what makes us fantastic.
Yeah.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. Have you got anything else to add with that, Alex?
No, I would just say, I think that we talked about it earlier, but I think, going back to the Commonwealth Games, I think we showed the West Midlands in absolutely the best light. It showed how diverse we are, how inclusive we are. So I think it just gave us that platform, and the work we now do gives us that platform that we've really now put Birmingham and the wider West Midlands on the map. So I think now it's an exciting time for us all to continue work together to actually say to the rest of the country at the right time, look, this is how you get a fully inclusive city of the West Midlands, because here's the detail that tells you how it can be done. So I just think it's an exciting time for us all to be a member of the West Midlands.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you both for taking the time to speak with me today. I think, it's been fantastic for me to hear your thoughts and views. And I think it is always great to actually be able to have that discussion between us, because obviously we all do have different opinions and everything. So being able to enlighten each other towards each of our opinions is great anyway. But I'm absolutely certain that people watching this podcast today are going to find it really, really interesting. So thank you so much for taking part, and I'll see you soon.
Cheers, thank you.
So I hope you all enjoyed all of that. And if you guys have anything to add about what myself, Mark and Alex discussed, comment below and let us know, or even drop me an email, because I'd be really interested to put that in the next podcast. See you later.